like that. Good evening. This is the opening of a public hearing. The date time is scheduled for a phosphate mining public roadway setback waiver application for June 5th, 2023 at 6 p.m. here at the County Center. And the applicant is Mosaic Fertilizer, LLC. It's application number DRI 230019. The mine involved is DRI 263 Lonesome Mine. And Mosaic Fertilizer, LLC is seeking approval to reduce the public roadway setback requirement pursuant to the Land Development Code to conduct extraction activities within a 91.7 acre section or portion of the Lonesome Mining Unit 13, and which was previously approved in DRI 263 Lonesome. The Mosaic Fertilizer LLC is asking for the setback distance of 80 feet from the required 200 feet public right-of-way on the east side of County Road 39, which is set by the Land Development Code. My name is Catherine Ginster. I've been appointed by the Board of County Commissioners to serve as the phosphate hearing master for this hearing. And the procedures for the hearing are set forth in the Land Development Code. I will not be making the final decision, but I'll be rendering findings and a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners will in turn, they will make the final decision at a public meeting to follow. I have 15 working days from today to provide the written recommendations and findings, which the deadline would be June 27th, 2023. So before we begin, I'd ask that you please rise so that we could say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it falls, one God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. So now I'm going to start by swearing in the witnesses here, but just give me a minute for the oath here. I had it here. Let's see. So for anyone that is going to testify today, I would ask that you take an oath of office and raise your right hand and stand, if you could do that. Thank you. And so I'd ask that before you testify that you declare that you will testify truthfully by taking oath or affirmation, and I'd ask you to swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Okay. And then when you, when it's your turn to come to the podium to testify, if you could just reaffirm that you gave your oath before your testimony. You also have to give your name and address before you speak. And if you have any written documents that you wish to have become part of the record or as part of your testimony, that you would bring them to me, and I'll take a look at it so you can explain or authenticate what the document is, and then we'll turn it over to the Board of Commissioners, County Commissioner Clerk, who will put it into the record. So, but you can be seated, thank you. So the procedures for this hearing are set forth in the Land Development Code, including the timing, how much time everyone has. Can I ask, how many people are speaking in favor of the application, other than the applicant? Is there, so how many people are speaking against it? Okay. So the procedures are set forth where the first applicant will come and present their case, and they have 15 minutes, and then there's an additional 15 minutes if needed. And so you can have a total of 30 minutes to make the presentation. And next, then we'll hear from the administrator and county staff, who get 5 minutes to present a summary of the application and department findings. And then there's a total of 15 minutes allowed for anyone speaking in favor of the application other than the applicant themselves. So usually, if we could divide it up by how many people are here, usually, try to give 3 minutes, or, if there's too many people speaking, like 2.5, depending on how that works out. Then the opponents will argue against the application. The whole group gets 15 minutes. And again, try to make that like 3 minutes per speaker, or if there's a lot of speakers, we might need to reduce that. And after the opponents of the application, the staff will come back up and speak for 5 minutes. And then the applicant is the final presenter, who will get 5 minutes to rebut and make a summation. And the code does give me discretion on whether or not to allow you additional time to speak for good cause. So again, when you approach, sign in with the clerk first, give your name and address. And the reason you give your address is because you'll get notified from the clerk. The clerk will be the keeper of the record, so if you need a copy of anything that happens here today or a copy of the transcript, you have the right to come in. The record, it's a public record, so you can either make an arrangement for the clerk's office to go and inspect the file, and they'll have a custodian with you while you do that, or you can get copies of the record, and there'll be some fee associated with that to pay for that. And if you want a copy of the final recommendations, it's going to go to the board automatically. The applicant will receive a copy from the clerk 3 days, I think, after they get the transcript from the proceeding and my final recommendations and, to the board, and then within 3 days, she'll distribute that to the applicant and to the administrator and to myself. So if anybody else wants a copy, then you can give her a self-addressed envelope with a stamp, and she'll send that to you. So if you would like to go forward, I think we could invite the applicant up to the podium to present the application.
Good evening, Hearing Master Ginster. I'm Vanette Gadelia with the law firm Stearns Weaver Miller. I'm counselor for Mosaic.
Welcome.
My address is 401 East Jackson Street in Tampa. I have a couple of binders. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. It has the record here, the PowerPoint presentation, resumes for the experts we're going to be presenting. So one for the clerk and one for you as well.
Okay. Thank you.
We typically have 15 minutes. You referenced that we can have an additional 15, and because we are going to be delving a little bit into detail in certain factors, this is the first time we're having a proceeding in 5 years, and your first proceeding as well, we'd like to take the additional 15 for a case in chief, if that is okay with you.
That's fine. You have the additional time.
So as you referenced, Mosaic already has approval to mine the area that's known as Lonesome Mining Unit 13, but that approval is subject to compliance with all code provisions, including for setbacks. And so on January 26th, Mosaic submitted its application for the waiver of roadway setback requirements. The applicable setback prohibits excavation within 200 feet of a public right-of-way, with the exception of perimeter ditches, isolator berms, and recharge ditches, known as BMPs. And so Mosaic seeks to reduce this setback to conduct extraction activities up to 80 feet from County Road 39 in LMU 13, and will make the appropriate demonstration as required by the code. So for today's proceeding then, the project area is the 120-foot area between 80 and 200 feet along a portion of County Road 39. We have 3 experts that will be presenting today. We have additional folks from Mosaic here. Again, we know it's the initial hearing, so if you have questions, you need anything clarified, we have people here to answer those questions for you.
Thank
So
you.
first, you'll be hearing from Jake Dotson with Mosaic. He's an expert in mine permitting. Tom Lato with Ardeman and Associates, who is an expert in geotechnical engineering and ground stability. And finally, from Tina Ekblad with Stearns Weaver Miller, who's an expert in planning. And I'll turn it over to Jake to give you the background on the application.
Please come sign in with me. Not you. Nope, I need you to come. No.
Me?
Yeah, I need you while you're presenting. She can sign in. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Hearing Master. I'm Jake Dotson, a permitting engineer for Mosaic. My address is 13830 Circa Crossing Drive, Lithia, Florida, 33547. I've been working for Mosaic for 5 years now. In the permitting department, I cover the Four Corners facility in both Hillsborough and Manatee counties. As for a quick project overview, the Lonesome Mine Development of Regional Impact, or DRI, was first approved by the county in 1974. In 2008, this mine and its DRI were consolidated with other adjacent mines into the Hillsborough County Consolidated Mine, which is currently governed by DRI 263. Looking at this general location map, you can see that the Lonesome Mining Unit 13 is located directly in the corner of County Road 39 and State Road 674. The entire mining unit consists of 640 acres, and when it was approved, 597 of these 640 acres were approved for mining. At this point, 452 acres have been mined, with the majority of remaining reserves falling underneath the utility corridor footprint that was built throughout. Now, with the mining in Lonesome coming to an end and approval from the county already to convert this corridor into mining, this application is only requesting a reduction in the applicable roadway setback distance along 39, similar to other nearby roadway setbacks that have already been approved. This next slide shows a table breaking down the permitting history of this entire project. As I've touched already, DRI 263 is the current development order governing Lonesome Mining Unit 13. The corridor was noticed for mining with the county in early February, and the ERP was obtained shortly after that. The area was also incorporated into our NPDES and IWUP permits in 2019 and 2021, respectively. Looking at existing conditions, the entire project boundary consists entirely of uplands, with almost all of it being previously disturbed. There have been no known impacts to any listed species, and we expect to have the remaining pre-clearing survey work completed by the end of this month. All of this will be consistent with our wildlife habitat management plan. Looking now at the mine plan, our request again is to reduce the standard 200-foot roadway setback to 80 feet along County Road 39. This is the western edge of the project boundary. The area outlined in yellow is the ditch and berm BMP, with the area in blue showing the mining. The area shown in black hatch, running along the narrow stretch of BMP, is the additional 9.3 acres of mining that will be gained from reducing this setback to 80 feet. There's also an existing utility crossing running underneath County Road 39 near the center of the project. It's the square cut out in the blue that has no coloring. This area will remain, or this jack and bore will remain in operation throughout and thus will stay avoided. There are no wetland impacts, but recharge ditches will be used in the northwest and southeast corners to provide additional groundwater recharge. The narrower section of BMP running along the black hatching will not have a recharge ditch, but only consist of a push berm used for vehicular traffic and stormwater management. This 9.3 acres of additional mining would generate over 37,000 tons of phosphate rock. So this next slide just shows a generalized view, cross-section of the modified ditch and berm that would just consist of a push berm. It shows the project boundary on the left, the push berm in the middle, and then the mining limits to the right. Based off our initial designs, the crest will be between 5 and 10 feet high, and there will be required drawdown wells to lower the water table once mining commences. This next slide shows the nearby roadway setbacks that have already received approval from the county. We have one within Lonesome Mining Unit 13 already along State Road 674 to the south, that also extends into Mining Unit 14 to the east. Mining Unit 19 to the west side of County Road 39 has an 80-foot setback along County Road 39 and a 60-foot setback along State Road 674 to the south. As for the reclamation plan, the area will be reclaimed as a woodland pasture and hardwood conifer mix. The mining area is expected to be reclaimed in 2026, and the BMP will come out in 2027, which at that point a tree line buffer will be started. The utilities crossing will remain in operation until 2032. At that point, it will become reclaimed. All of this reclamation will be conducted in accordance with our FDE-approved conceptual reclamation plan. Now I'd like to turn it over to Tom Lito.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Madam. My name is Tom Lito with the firm Ardman and Associates, Inc., a Tetra Tech company. My business location is 1525 Centennial Boulevard, Bartow, Florida. I have a Bachelor of Civil Engineering degree from the University of Florida. I'm a Florida licensed professional. I have 54 years experience in geotechnical engineering and ground stability studies with Ardman and Associates, Inc. I have more than 50 years experience in the performance of mine extraction, pit high walls, and similar areas involved in phosphate mining in Central Florida and elsewhere. The slide with photograph to the right with the north up on the page represents the mining section that we are talking about tonight. This represents a strip of land that will be subject to mine extraction by a walking dragline, cutting near to the public right-of-way of County Road 39 on the eastern side. Note that on the western side, mining had preceded this particular application several years ago, and Ardman and Associates, Inc. staff conducted that study to determine the safe setback of the mining dragline cutting a high wall adjacent to a certain setback from the public right-of-way of County Road 39. The investigation at that time resulted in successful mining and setback respect. The data that was collected during that time and the test borings also collected at that time were adopted by my company for the study on the eastern side to determine a safe setback from the public right-of-way of County Road 39. In general, the soil conditions there are standard normal conditions consisting of sandy soils that range from loose to dense from a depth of surface to 17 feet. And then below that we have from 17 to 42 feet medium compact, more compact sandy soils that overlie the so-called ore, the mining ore, which we call matrix. The matrix ranges from 42 to 47 feet below grade, and below that is a rigid layer that we call bedrock or sometimes bed clay. The groundwater table was not encountered in the study on the western side. We adopted that very same principle that the water table level would be below 10 feet on the eastern side. In addition, prior to mining, there will be some dewatering going on the eastern side to help stabilize the high wall and get a better extraction of the ore without sloughing and cave-in. The next slide shows a slice of the earth. County Road 39 is on the left-hand side. The mine extraction face is on the right-hand side with that sloping, ubiquitous slope that we call the mine cut slope. The green layer on the bottom is the bottom, the so-called pit bottom, and what would look like light blue above that is the mining or mineable matrix. And above that, the pink and the purple and the orange are the overburden material, which is extracted along before taking out the matrix to the right of the cut, the mine cut. The vertical line is the public right-of-way or or property line, and the semicircular area with a focus up above is what is called a slip circle. This is basically a slip line through which the earth wants to fall down. And what we do there is to make sure that the failure does not encroach in any critical areas, particularly within the infrastructure or any other utilities within the public right-of-way. So that is the gauge and metrics we use to make sure that we do not disturb anything in the public right-of-way or utilities within the right-of-way or the roadway itself. Now, how we get to this point is that we understand that the soil mass on the sloping side of an open cut or trench will have that tendency to want to fall down out of result of just simple gravity. We call this an instability case. The stability analyses that we use with high-powered computer and software allows us to determine hundreds or even thousands of those slip circles so that we find out exactly what's going to happen when we apply the different properties of soils and the working area we choose to work within. Now, of course, mechanically lowering the water table level is helpful because it increases the weight of the soil and increases the properties such as friction and does not bother with the cohesion, but there is cohesion there that helps retain or restrain the slip circle from becoming apparent, an apparent condition. So those forces that cause the instability are resisted by the so-called friction and cohesion of the soils along that slip circle. And our process is to analyze those conditions by a conventional limit equilibrium method. Our goal is to derive a factor of safety of 1.5, which means that the resisting forces are at least 50% greater than the driving forces. In other words, the resisting forces are 150% of the driving forces, so that, in essence, it gives us the conservative basis for setting that setback that is greater than the ordinance setback. Again, we're making sure that that slip circle with a factor of safety of 1.5 does not go to the left of that line or encroach on the public right-of-way of County Road 39. We package all that information in an engineering report and provide that to the client, Mosaic, given the basis of investigation, our conclusions, and recommendations for monitoring the mining operations so that period by period, the geologist or his representative can track any potential anomalies in the cut or any signs of impending failure such as cracks, scarps, or concentrated seepage through the high wall. So he is looking for signs of distress, and at that point he would call the operations manager so that they could step back, cast back the overburden material to buttress that high wall so that it will not fall into the pit. So these are all things that have been practiced for years and years and decades in my practice of this type of engineering. Mosaic has requested a setback of 80 feet from the public right-of-way. This is a requested setback. We have in our determination through calculations that a setback of 60 feet is protective of the roadway and terrain and any critical infrastructure within that public right-of-way. We recommend that the cuts be made perpendicular to the traverse of the right-of-way so that the opening and open face will be open only for a short duration of time, and before the drag line moves to the next cut, The dragline will cast back the overburden to buttress the open face so that it will remain intact for the duration of its life until reclamation is done. The client is given the recommendations for monitoring, and that would be placed into a plan that would be used by the geologist and his representatives in doing the periodic inspections of the mining cut face during the duration of mining and extraction. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Okay, I have some questions, if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I read your report earlier today. Do you know how wide the public right-of-way is? Like, from the center line, is it 100 feet from the yellow line in, or do you know the width of the road?
I do not have that information from the center line of the road to the property line, which is the public right-of-way edge. It is on the drawing. I don't have a recall of that at the moment.
I read in, okay, so yeah, all right. So I need to, and maybe the county can answer that, but the width of the road and then the width of the right-of-way, because it's different. And is the Mosaic property line, is it marked by a fence? There's a chain link fence out there, correct?
There is, in my recall, a barbed wire fence at the property line.
Okay. And you said the excavation is going to go down 17 feet?
It will go down nominally 47 feet below land surface.
47 feet. And then you're going to use this equipment called the drag line? That's the only type of equipment that'll be out there, or?
The drag line will be supported, the digging drag line will be supported by bulldozers and other types of equipment to help it move. And the bulldozers will also be present to push material toward the smoothing and leveling of the castback material against the face, which would be facing up against the 60-foot mark from the public right-of-way, so that pile will be knocked down to make it more aesthetically pleasing, and also to provide a buttress, a better and bigger buttress, to keep the pit high wall from further moving if it wanted to move.
So when you say 60 feet from the public right-of-way, that's the edge of the public right-of-way, not the road, right? Whatever that distance is to measure.
Because
the asphalt road there is probably less than the actual total width of the right-of-way, correct?
the asphalt roadway is on order of 11 feet per lane or 12 feet per lane from center line. And then you have terrain, grass terrain to the property line, which is the fence. Our top of the cut, what we call the head of the cut, is 60 feet hence to the right of the property line. And the cut will extend downward at a slope of 1.5 feet horizontal to 1 foot vertical to the depth of 47 feet. And then the extraction is complete at that point. In the meantime, as the drag line is making its maneuvers, they will take the approximate 40 feet of overburden and cast it back to buttress, to shore up the face so that it does not want to slide. Now, there will be a heap of cast material against the face, and the tractors will come in there to smooth it out and level it so that it's more aesthetically pleasing from the roadway and anywhere else.
So the stability or the slope of these materials, how high does that get the materials when they're digging it out and they're going to put it over on the side? Is that?
Well, generally, the majority of the material is placed into the adjacent cut, the first cut made, and then each adjacent cut. And the head of the cut facing the high wall will have a certain amount of material that is buttressing the cut, and it may stand anywhere from 5 to 15 feet higher than the land surface, but that will be subsequently knocked down so that it is in a proper, more aesthetically pleasing position.
So, when you did the monitoring wells, the 3 monitoring wells you tested in your report, are they located within the area that you're going to be excavating?
Well, the data is collected from what we call structural test borings. It is a vertical boring that is done with a machine that drills down to deeper than 47 feet to understand the bedrock. And those were done on the western right-of-way during a prior investigation. But because natural ground is rather uniformly placed in nature over thousands of years, we adopted that information in addition to other information that we had gathered in the area for different reasons, like a dragline crossing, gas line crossings, the building of the plant on the eastern side, back of the right-of-way at some time in the past, and other places that we've done borings in that region. So we have a lot of information. As I mentioned, the bypass road that we built there. So all this information is put together to assemble the parameters and properties for use in the computer program for these analyses.
So when you did the work on the western side of the road, was that directly across from where you're going to be doing it on the eastern side?
Yes, ma'am, exactly directly. We chose the borings that would match the length of excavation that we intend to do on the eastern side of County Road 39.
And are you done with the excavation over on the western side, or?
It has been completed. It was completed years ago.
Oh. And did you ever have any issues or problems with that when it was a?
No, ma'am, it went very well.
And how long are you planning on doing the excavation for? Is it in the area that you're going to do here along the public right-of-way?
I would defer to Mr. Dotson on that.
Okay. And you said the geologists will be going out and doing, because I see in your report you recommended like that staff be trained to go up and check the top of the materials to make sure there's no cracks or on a routine basis. Is that, when you say routine, what do you mean by that? Is that once a month or?
Well, basically,
Once a week?
a geologist visits the pit frequently to look at quality of material as matching what is prospect data. So he makes a routine tour, but he may choose a representative to fill in or supplement his tours, and then he would be trained to look for what we're talking about. And that is in the report. We talk about cracks, tension cracks, scarps, head scarps, anything that would suggest that the banks are wanting to collapse, concentrated seepage of groundwater that might have passed or escaped the wells, the dewatering wells. All these are clues that they should do something, step back, button up, so that we do not lose any more ground.
So the mining and the excavation will be done under the supervision then of a licensed geologist, is that?
He does not directly supervise the excavations. The operator's management team does that, but he is the adjunct person who collects information to see if the quality of material is matching what was explored. And he will conduct not a study, but he'll conduct his investigation, take pictures, and prepare notes from those visits.
So then when you're looking at the quality of material to make sure it matches what you suspect is over on the eastern side, because then you might redo your models, or if the material were different?
Actually, it would be, in essence, the quality of the ore body, the matrix, to match what is expected, to make sure that the excavation is not digging too deep and mining material that is not exactly amenable to the plant processing material quality extraction. So in essence, he matches what is expected from the prospect borings, and looking at the bottom, he will confer with management to advise whether they're too deep or maybe they could go deeper in certain circumstances.
So you made some recommendations in the back here about, to Mosaic Fertilizer regarding having their staff be trained. Was that your recommendation there? I think at the end of your report. So
Yes,
that they
ma'am.
would go out and make visual inspections on a routine basis, or?
Yes, there are inspectors and project personnel who can assist the geologist in making those inspections. That would be more frequent than what the geologist would be in a position to make. So that person would be trained in the program. In other words, there's a development program, an operation manual in what is expected and what to look for and who to contact in the event that a detection of an abnormal situation arises.
And how often are you recommending that you said that they should go out there on a routine basis? What's routine mean?
Well,
what's routine to you?
In essence, the geologist would go there for quality assurance purposes, and in doing so, he would drive or walk the high wall when they're digging on the high wall. They're not digging on the high wall every day. They're digging on the high wall periodically, so he has to time himself when they're digging against the high wall. But I would say when digging right up at the cut line, it would be likened to once a week at least. And if he has a designated agent with him, an employee who's been trained, then he would have him come in between his visits.
And when you say train, you mean by a geologist then on what to look for or?
Yes, he would be given the pamphlet or the report that provides the information that is desired, and he would be trained orally in what to look for by the geologist.
So you were also saying that the Mosaic, you recommended they have a pre-planned response to significant slope movement, and it should be developed and circulated amongst the employees. Do you know if they already have that or if they've in place?
Each of those programs are site-specific. They're far and few between, so it would be prepared specifically for this site.
Okay.
And then there would be discussions with his assistant or his staff personnel, his colleague, and then they would likely to confer this information on the dragline operators, their shift operators, and the geologist would have direct communication with the dragline operator by telephone or in person to be looking out for certain things.
And do you have any recommendations like following like a severe storm or if there's a lot of rainfall as far as inspection, following like severe weather or severe storm here? Do you have a lot of rainfall that would affect? Because I understand water is pretty harmful to the materials that'll be setting there in the slope.
Basically, Mosaic has a plan that would curtail operations or shut down the operation once the wind speeds arise at a certain velocity, hurricane or tropical storm condition. They have conditions 1, 2, and 3, and the personnel would be advised and alerted to look for any possibilities of stormwater runoff concentrated in certain areas, and that is where the best management practices, BMP, berm, would come into play to make sure that the rainfall runoff coming from the road or anywhere else does not enter into the mine cut in certain ways, concentrated forms that would carve gullies or anything that would be harmful to that 60-foot setback or any other place near to the right-of-way.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned that you use the 1.5, the safety factor for your analysis. Is that standard in the industry for this type of excavation, or?
Yes, ma'am. It is a minimum factor of safety for the slope stability of cut faces like we're talking about tonight.
So it's a minimum, why wouldn't you go higher? Is 1.5 sufficient, or?
The parameters used in the program and the circumstances that are applied in the analyses have a level of conservatism in them already built in. So the 1.5 is standardized to different applications, like even dam safety in the state of Florida rules. So there isn't any reason to increase them unless there's some differing condition or unknown condition that we may miss.
And is the 1.5 established by, like, geology type of association or FDOT, or?
It is what we call the standard of care in this type of engineering for ground stability.
And who's that established by, do you know, or?
I'm sorry?
Who establishes the standard of care?
It is the practice of engineers like myself in the region over a period of time.
And is that written down somewhere then, like in a manual or standard that exists?
There are publications, there are textbooks by different scholarly writers that would address these for different types of mining. Phosphate mining, certainly in Florida, is not the only mining in Florida. There's sand mining, and there's mining out west, up north, Canada, throughout the world. So each region has their own standard of care. But for phosphate mining, in our experience, over 60 years, 70 years of observing, not myself, I've only done it for 54 years, but basically we learn by experience, and we share the experience with our colleagues and share it orally and in writing.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned in your report there are power lines along the roadway. I think there was a concern about that. Was that, that would be located in the right-of-way area, the power lines?
The power lines are owned by Mosaic, and either they'll be removed or they will be deactivated. I don't know exactly, Mr. Dawson.
Oh, those power lines are all owned by Mosaic?
I believe that Mr. Dawson can clarify.
Okay, so, gotcha. And this, how far away is, you mentioned like there's a substation, a TECO substation nearby to where this excavation's going to be?
In my recollection, there is a substation on the western side near to 674, County Road 674 by the store, across the street from the grocery store.
Okay. And will the equipment, the heavy equipment that you call a drag line, it's got like a big, like long arm on it with a shovel, but is that going to be swinging over the roadway at all when you're doing work? I mean, is there going to be any?
No, ma'am. It is an electric walking drag line. It has a bucket that can bite 45 or so cubic yards at a time on a drag chain and a long boom. The boom is fixed. It swings on a pivot on a base, and it walks itself through a process. It will not be swinging over the road.
And is there any way to predict with any kind of reasonable certainty if the slope of materials, if it were to become unstable, which way it's going to fall? Or is there, does it depend on other factors? Or like, is it going to fall into the public roadway? Or?
No, ma'am. It is at grade. If it's going to fail, it will be a semicircular slide, typically a small slide in breadth and depth, and it will slide into the open pit. There's nobody there. And once that happens, then we would take measures to button the place up. We will step back, throw back material to buttress it, and then the engineer will be contacted to determine what the next course would be to see what should be done. But of course, there's 60 feet of buffer between the cut face line and the public right-of-way and property line.
Can that be sufficient for it to fall within that area then?
There's plenty of room there for.
And if you had a hurricane then, or like Ian, like a Category 4 or whatever, is there any way you can secure that material during the hurricane, or?
Well, in essence, as the drag line is doing its movements and turnaround, it will buttress, so it will add material to the face. Therefore, in theory, the 60 feet becomes wider to the eastward, in theory. And in essence, there will be the best management practices berm that will separate the runoff from the road and the right-of-way to keep that runoff from entering into the cut unorganized or disorderly. So in essence, there is control of runoff along that berm, and the pit itself will be safe during any amount of precipitation depth.
Is there, if you have that heavy equipment there, is there any chance, like I guess depending on the severity of the hurricane, like that it could be the equipment's going to roll or get carried away to go? I mean, how much wind velocity would you need to do that with that type of equipment?
Well, basically, the bulldozers are with very low center of gravity. They weigh probably between 40 and 60,000 pounds. They'll just simply park them, and they're perfectly safe. The drag line itself will be safe in itself. The people will leave the site if the wind velocity is over a certain amount, and they will only return after the all clear notice is given.
Okay. Well, thanks for your answers. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Sure, yep, everything here. And I think that's all the questions I have for you, but thanks so much
Yeah.
for answering my questions.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Hearing Master. My name is Tina Ekblad. I'm the Director of Planning for Stearns Weaver Miller. Our office address is 401 East Jackson Street, Tampa, 33602, and I have been sworn. Just a little bit about my credentials, since this is my first time in front of you tonight. I am a two-time graduate from Florida Gulf Coast University. I do have a Bachelor's of Arts and a Master's of Public Administration, both with a focus on environmental studies and environmental policy. I have been practicing planning for 17 years. 12 of those years have been involved in mining entitlements. I am also a certified planner through the American Institute of Certified Planners. Before I move on, I do want to make a few clarifying statements from what you just heard from Mr. Lito. So while his report was based on a 60-foot setback regarding safety and other conclusions, the request tonight is for an 80-foot setback. That setback would be measured from the property boundary, which is immediately adjacent to the right-of-way line. So to answer your question about the pavement, there would be another significant separation from the pavement to the right-of-way line. The reason for the electrical line is this is currently a utility access corridor for the existing approved mine. The way the original approval was set up was for that utility corridor to remain, for mining to occur to the east, and then as mining closed out in the east, the utilities that were no longer needed would be taken out, and we would mine that utility corridor at end of life. So that does get to my initial point, which is we are in the middle of an existing mine that was actually originally approved in the mid-70s. It has been amended multiple times, as you saw in the chart from Mr. Dotson. I believe the most recent approval was approved in 2008. As a result, we do have a number of other agency permits and conditions from Hillsborough County that have initiated monitoring and other programs that we're being consistent with, that this property and this excavation will also have to be consistent with. So when it comes to the requirements of the Land Development Code and the setback reduction, demonstrating that the lesser requirement does not adversely affect public health, safety, or welfare, as well as the impacts on water quality, water quantity, air quality, vibration, noise, aesthetics, and the environment, we are relying on those existing conditions. We will be subject to those existing requirements. And so specifically, we have a permit, an NPDES permit and an IWUP that require monitoring related to stormwater management, surface water, and also our groundwater. And the area subject to this request will be pulled into those permits, and therefore we will be subject to those existing conditions. You've heard quite a bit about the best management practices, the perimeter berm, and also the existing ditch and berm system, which this excavation will be incorporated into and utilized to maintain groundwater levels. It will also maintain surface water on site. So you heard Mr. Leto explain surface water from the right-of-way will not come into our property. It also keeps our surface water within our property boundaries to ensure we don't have that exchange. And so together, the appropriate protections are in place for water quality and water quantity for you to make that finding as required by the Land Development Code. There are no surrounding properties in the immediately adjacent area to this request because they are owned by Mosaic. We have current conditions related to our air quality, our vibrations, and our noise that we must abide by. The perimeter berm will range between 5 and 10 feet, which will ensure the aesthetics from the adjacent county roadway. If you are sitting driving in a car, you are going to see that perimeter berm instead of the excavation occurring on site. And so I believe that you can also make a finding that there are no significant adverse impacts to air quality, vibrations, noise, and aesthetic. We do not have any wetland impacts that are anticipated as a result of this excavation and the reduced setback. The stormwater management system already addresses on-site drainage as well as the floodplain. Again, this additional land area will be incorporated into those existing permits, ensuring protection of wetlands, off-site drainage, and the floodplain. The existing approval and the unified ownership ensure the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. Through the analysis provided by Mr. Leto and your extensive questioning, I believe he has also demonstrated that while a lesser setback was evaluated and could be requested, we have chosen not to do that tonight. We are, again, requesting that 80 feet from the right-of-way. And that is consistent with setbacks that have been requested for the mining units in the past. Many of our setbacks from State Road 674 are less than the current request. They're approximately 50 feet. There have been no known issues with these reduced setbacks in the past. And so it is my professional opinion that the requested 80-foot setback has met the criteria for a reduction from the code required 200 feet to be awarded and does maintain the public health, safety, and welfare. We would respectfully request your recommendation of approval to this reduced setback, and that does conclude our main presentation. Myself and the rest of the team are available for questions should you have any at this time.
I do have questions, if that's okay. So your permits, I went through all the permits that you provided, and I noticed, there's a lot of different names that you use, and just wanted to clear up for consistency. There's one that was called, for the NPDES permit, and the stormwater was called Fort Lonesome. Is that a typo, or at least in the NPDES permit that I looked at in the file, it was, they said the applicant was, is that, are you known by Fort Lonesome? I saw Four Corners in some, or the Four Corners Lonesome Mine. So just trying to get all these names. I assume they're all referring to the same area, person or entity or area.
So fortunately or unfortunately, due to the extensive time history of this mine and some of the others, they have been combined under multiple types of permits, and depending on the timing of the permit will depend on the name. So while the geographic area may align, sometimes the naming convention does not.
So is the correct name of this particular area, is it Four Corners Lonesome Mine 13, or is Four Corners in front of it?
I believe the DRI is named Hillsborough County Consolidated Mines
Okay.
for that exact reason.
And I saw your NPDES permit goes to December 2023, and then there's an application in the file for your wildlife habitat management plan in August 2022. Has that been approved? I didn't see anything where you actually had approval on that. It was an environmental resource permit?
I personally don't do the environmental permitting, so I'm going to ask someone from Mosaic to handle that and just point out that that is most likely for the existing mine, not the setback area that we are
Okay.
requesting tonight.
But you did have recommendations in there for the wildlife as far as, you know, gopher, turtles, and some birds, like, you know, so I'm just wondering in the if that's actually been approved. And there's a reference to incorporating the wildlife plan from, I believe, 2020, which I didn't receive a copy of, but.
The Hillsborough County staff report does include conditions that require us to conduct additional surveys, and should wildlife be found on site, conduct very species-specific surveys at that time when mining occurs in this area.
And I had a question for you too on the property. So I got two deeds, and they're in the name of IMC-Arago Company. And I looked up the properties on the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser site, and the two deeds you provided for the two separate parcels that are involved for this excavation are still in that name, at least according to the electronic records. So I understand there's that Mosaic Fertilizer LLC is some sort of that would be you're a successor to that company, or that company name under either partnership agreements or mergers. But I don't have anything in the record to tie the name of the title property holders for the two parcels that are involved here to Mosaic Fertilizer LLC. And maybe the county has that. It's just that this is the first time I've had this hearing, and I have to rely on the record that I have. So I need to get some sort of documentation that would trace how you have ownership of the property.
If written submittals are permitted, I'm sure we can obtain that and provide that to you.
Yeah, I would appreciate if you could. That would be very helpful, because especially as far as your aesthetics, and because you say you're the surrounding property owner. So, but I have to somehow make a leap from what the title holder is to Mosaic Fertilizer LLC actually being the owner of the property, which I'm sure, you know, under your merger documents or whatever it would be.
Madam Hearing Master, just to let you know, exhibits after the record has closed cannot be accepted by the clerk's office.
They cannot.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I mean, on behalf of the company, we can represent that Mosaic Fertilizer is a successor in interest to all of those named entities. Not sure what else we can provide. We have several Mosaic folks here. If there's one particular one that we could have come up to make that representation to you.
Yeah, if you could have one testify that they're the successor in interest, because I don't have anything to tie, like who owns the property to Mosaic.
We'll have Mr. Russell Schweiss.
And I've noted I found online when I was doing some research on it that there actually were some documents filed with a different county to show like the merger documents and all the partnership agreements over the years.
Hi, Madam Hearing Master. My name is Russell Schweiss. I'm the Vice President of Land and Resource Strategies for Mosaic. I didn't think I was going to have to speak, so I wasn't sworn, so I need to be sworn.
Oh, okay, we can do that for you.
I also need your address, sir.
It's 13830 Circa Crossing Drive, Lithia, Florida.
So, if you could raise your hand and just, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in 2004, IMC merged with Cargill Fertilizer, Crop Nutrition to create Mosaic. And so the assets of both companies were combined under Mosaic at that time, and that's what I'm attesting to.
And Mosaic's a Delaware company.
Yes.
Doing business in the state of
Mosaic
Florida.
Fertilizer LLC, who is your applicant, is a subsidiary of that company.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you.
And I have another question regarding the application when it stated that you've applied for BOCC approval for mining of the MU13 utility corridor that would be considered in February 2023. Was that approved?
Pose the question again. I want to make sure I give you a specific answer. Was it as to the corridor, as to the mining unit? What was the comment?
Under project history in the original application, it was a report called Request for Roadway Setback Waiver, and there's a comment on page 2, under 2, project history, and it says you've applied for approval to be able to do mining, I believe, in the MU13 corridor from the Board of County Commissioners, and that it would be considered in February 2023, and I was asking if that had been approved.
Yes, that was approved as a part of the annual report back in February of 2023.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Madam Hearing Master, we do have one other person I want to have provide you with some clarity on the inspection process that takes place while the area along the roadway is being mined. So we have Mr. Kenny Miller here, who's General Manager for Four Corners, and if he could come up and just speak to that real quickly.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll give you his resume.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vanette. My name's Kenny Miller. My work address is 414 West Main Street, Wauchula, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
So just a little clarity around what's going on while the dragline's mining. We have degree geologists on staff that make observations at the mining machines every day, Monday through Friday. So typically they're off on the weekend. So those observations are made for a couple of reasons. One is to determine, one of the biggest things we'd like to determine is the stability of where the dragline is sitting. So these machines weigh 7 million pounds. There's about a 325-foot boom on them, so they have a lot of so there's a lot of weight. So we don't want to lose those machines. So those geologists are there to look at high wall stability and the stability of where the machine is actually sitting. So part of that work also is to look along the right-of-way, along the BMP boundary, to be sure that we don't have any unstable conditions. So that work takes place once a day at every machine. The other thing that we have that's unique is all of our machines have cameras, so you can actually see in front of the machine where it's mining, and that's being observed at our Integrated Operations Center at Fishhawk. So we have people on staff there that are watching the operations of the machine as well to determine, and you'd be able to see if there was something going on along that high wall. So again, the other mining practices Mr. Leto mentioned is as we excavate overburden to uncover the matrix that we're mining, we place that overburden against that high wall to help prevent any type of sloughing or relieve any type of stability issues that may be present.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
One other point, I'll have Jake Dotson speak to the timing of the excavation operation.
Yes, so you asked earlier what we expected. We expected to take around 3 months from once mining starts to complete the area, and we're not expected to start until October, which would be the start of dry season
So the whole process will only take 3 months?
for that section of mining, yes.
And it's 1,700, like, it wasn't square feet, it was 1,700. The length of it where you're in
Yeah,
that,
the total acreage is, the total disturbance acreage is just over 91 feet. So it's around 60 acres of mining, and then
60 acres, okay. So it's like, all right, great. Well, that'll be pretty quick then, 3 months, all right.
And to answer your other question on the wildlife habitat management plan, that was approved in our ERP in 2022. We did have to do some new pre-clearing surveys because those expire within a year, so we are completing those again. But the wildlife habitat management plan was approved with that ERP
It was approved, okay.
in 2022. Yes, ma'am.
And is it approved annually, or do they give you a longer period of time when the Fish and Wildlife Commission?
No, yeah, once the permit is issued, then it remains in effect until that permit expires.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant finished with your presentation? Thank you so much. And so the county staff, administrator staff.
Good evening, Hearing Master Ginster. My name is Kim Cruz. I'm with Hillsborough County Environmental Services Division of Public County Utilities Department. I attest that I've been sworn and I confirm my oath. My work address is 322 North Falkenberg Road, Tampa, Florida. I anticipate that my review summary will take roughly about 10 minutes. Could you grant me additional 5 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. So application number 23-119, development order setback waiver reduction. As you informed us, the applicant does request 200-foot setback that is required by Land Development Code to be reduced to 80 feet from the right-of-way along the east side of County Road 39 for mining-related activities within Lonesome Mining Unit 13. And Lonesome Mining Unit 13 was approved to be mined back in January 9th, 1990, and a similar setback reduction along County Road 39 was granted across the street for Lonesome Mining Unit 19. That setback reduction was also 80 feet from the road, as Mosaic had indicated. And the Land Development Code also allows a setback reduction up to 50 feet from the property that may be granted if the applicant demonstrates the setback requirements are reasonable and has provided competent substantial evidence that a lesser requirement would not adversely affect public health, safety, and welfare. The LDC also states that the waiver, if granted, cannot affect adjacent properties with respect to impacts to water quality, water quantity, air quality, vibration, noise, aesthetics, environmental impacts to wetlands, offsite drainage, and floodplains. And these are the topics that were reviewed for county staff with regards to this application. So, adjacent properties, along County Road 39, County Road 39 splits both subject parcels, which are 647 acres and 510 acres apiece. And the properties immediately adjacent to the proposed setback waiver include land owned by the applicant for phosphate mining on both sides and a TECO substation located on the southwest side of County Road 39. Like I said, that Mosaic does own these very large parcels, which are much larger compared to adjacent properties. But additional properties adjacent to the parcels, within 500 feet of the parcels, do include pasture with manufactured home, cropland, orchard, utility, commercial, vacant residential, and vacant acreage. Mosaic provided a stability analysis to demonstrate that reduction of up to 60 feet from the right-of-way would still be protective of critical infrastructure, which is less than the 50 feet that they could possibly be granted. There are no expected impacts to be to the performance of the clay selling area L1 located on the east side of the proposed mining tract based off of their report. And an agency condition of approval requests the applicant to adhere to all conditions recommended by the Arteman and Associates report of mining setback analysis, and all off-site right-of-way drainage shall remain unchanged and unblocked per the original existing layout. The proposal does not include impacts to wetlands or the floodplain. Minimum setbacks from the adjacent wetlands, as required by the LDC, the Land Development Code, will be adhered to. And recharge ditches will be installed between the mined areas and wetlands to avoid dewatering of the wetlands. These systems will be monitored by SWIFMUD, Southwest Florida Water Management District Integrated Water Use Permit. So there will be some monitoring with that. And recharge ditches will be constructed to route stormwater through a previously approved existing water recirculation system to prevent impacts to offsite drainage, floodplains, and maintain offsite hydrologic conditions. And our findings were also that stormwater treatment will be subject to the state of Florida Department of Environmental Protection Lonesome or Fort Lonesome NPDES, which is National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit for treatment and monitoring requirements. Surface water and groundwater monitoring will be in accordance with the Southwest Florida Water Management District Integrated Water Use Permit and will remain in place until their reclamation is complete. An agency condition of approval requests that all preservation areas and EP wetlands shall be protected by best management practices, which are our preventative measures, and water recharge ditches prior to mining. this condition of approval is consistent with the applicant's proposal. The applicant did identify the potential occurrence of protected species within the project area. An agency condition of approval requests that if a southeastern American kestrel nest is identified during the pre-clearing survey, then appropriate steps will be taken to avoid a take or coordinate with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation to obtain a permit. Additionally, all required state approvals and/or permits shall be obtained prior to mining if relocation of protected species is necessary. These two conditions for approval are consistent with the applicant's proposal. There are no significant upland wildlife habitats within the proposed area, which is consistent with the Hillsborough County Wildlife Habitat Map, adopted by Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners. For aesthetics, berms are proposed to be constructed along County Road 39. An agency condition of approval requests these berms be sodded and 5 to 10 feet tall to provide visual mitigation of mining operations along County Road 39. These are the same ditches that will be along the right-of-way, and there's also ditches on the northern side and southern side as well. Their mining will not be conducted all the way down to State Road 674. It is only along the County Road 39, which is what the setback is for. The applicant indicated there are existing preventative measures in place to address fugitive dust. Due to the lack of adjacent properties, they're expecting, under separate ownership, they're expecting that there are no negative impacts to adjacent properties resulting from the requested setback reduction. The reclamation plans associated with the proposed activities are consistent with the most recent Board of County Commissioner approved post-reclamation plans, which is them requiring to contour the land to specific standards, and then also planting specific ecosystems within certain locations of the mining unit. Additional requests for conditional approval include the following. All original approved conceptual reclamation plans approved by the Board of County Commissioners shall be complied with unless a revised approval is granted. And all remnant agricultural ditches identified within Lonesome Mining Unit 13 mining boundary shall be reclaimed. Now, in accordance with Section 252.363 Florida statutes, the declaration of a state of emergency issued by the governor for a natural emergency extends the period remaining to exercise the rights under a permit or additional authorization for the duration of emergency declaration plus an additional 6 months. At this time, the Mosaic is required to complete mining by October 9th, 2023. However, due to the ongoing emergency order for Hurricane Ian, the date is expected to be extended to January 28th, 2025, unless an emergency order continues to be renewed by the governor. In closing, the proposal appears to be consistent with the requirements of the LDC. The application appears to be consistent with the requirements of the LDC and Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. And based on the above consideration, staff finds the request approvable with conditions. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
I was looking at your conditions that you made a recommendation to in the report. It was part of the file on staff recommendations. On page 8 of 10 is where you have them listed. And in your second paragraph where you make a recommendation or a condition on after mining and reclamation of the proposed area, the plan of vegetated buffer consistent with the application 890.21B. There's not a
Correct.
copy of that in the file.
I currently do not have a digital copy of that. We have a paper copy of that in the office. Basically that, I'm surprised I didn't, hold on a second.
I would like to see it if I could to understand what's in that. If you're going to make that a condition as part of your recommendation, if that were to be adopted.
Yes, that, I thought I read that part here. Hold on a second. Yes, I did miss that part. If you don't mind Yes, there is a condition of approval requesting the applicant to comply with a vegetative buffer, which was which was from application 890.12P.
Right.
And that is to provide visual mitigation for the clay settling area that is currently on site. It's L1. It's right here. If you don't mind, Mosaic has the,
That would be very helpful. Just so, to review the condition to make sure.
do you want to?
I'd like to see what you're referring to. If we could get that entered in the record.
So basically when the adjacent mining unit to the east was approved for the clay settling area, there was a condition that Mosaic had to provide a tree buffer to provide visual mitigation of the clay settling area. And that would be consistent with the comprehensive plan to provide visual mitigation to ensure, hold on a second.
Because you'd be referring to some specific standard within this particular document,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Which is,
So basically, here it says that the tree buffer shall meet the following conditions. All plant material is to be native to Hillsborough County and appropriate to survival and existing siting conditions such as soil, moisture regime, etc. And at least 75% of trees planted by evergreen, such as pine, cedar, live oak, wax myrtle, holly, magnolia, red bay, myrtle oak, sand live oak, etc. And non-evergreen trees should be randomly planted throughout the buffer, with none planted in the row adjacent to State Road 674. And all plants shall be Florida #1 grade quality, healthy, full, foliated, bushy. And the plant selection should include a mixture of at least five different species. And this is a tree buffer that shall extend along the entire road frontage of mining units 13 and 14. And since this is a setback waiver for mining unit 13, Mosaic has still yet to abide by this because they haven't mined the area yet.
okay, thank you. And for your recommendation, the condition in number 4, you talk about all preservation and EPC wetlands shall be protected by best management practices. But in another part of the report, it says no wetlands are affected. Is there?
Correct. So Mosaic does not propose to mine within any wetlands. So they're not going to impact any wetlands, but they will be protected based off of their application. They will be providing ditch and berm systems to keep water, basically keep the groundwater level elevated to prevent the wetlands from draining out. And the berms also protect the wetlands from the mining activity as well. And so that's why I said that the wetlands are not to be impacted, meaning that they're not going to be mined, but they will be protected by best management practices.
And how close are they in proximity to the location of the wetlands to the?
I do not recall. I would like to defer to Mosaic. I do not recall off the top of my head
Okay.
what that distance is.
That would be helpful if you knew. Do you know how the county acquired the county road?
How the county acquired
it-
the county road, I have no idea.
I read in the report that the public right-of-way is 100 feet, I believe, or do you
You're
know the
talking
size
about,
of the road or the size of the right-of-way?
I do know
in
that the paved area is 12 feet wide for each lane. And
It's 2-lane, right?
correct, it's a 2-lane road, and basically, if you include the sides next to so the entire pavement width is 32 feet approximately, from my measurements.
So the right-of-way is 100 feet and the asphalt road is 32 feet?
The right-of-way setback requirement is,
No, I understand. I'm asking because I'm trying to figure out how big is the right-of-way? Like, what's the size of the right-of-way? What's the size of the road?
That I
And then
do-
it's 200 feet back from the edge of the public right-of-way according to the definitions in the Land Development Code.
Correct. I do not have an answer for you on that one.
Okay. Do you know who maintains the road? Is it the county?
Yes, it's a county road, so the county maintains it.
Okay. And what's the one utility that's down below in the right-of-way?
That's a Tampa Electric Company. They have, it's on the bottom left corner. It's north of State Road 674 and west of County Road 39.
And-
Right on the corner.
And it's underground or above ground, or what is the?
It's a substation. It's
Oh, the
above ground.
substation. That's when you're saying there's one utility, it's a substation?
Correct.
So there's no like underground utilities like located in the right-of-way where there's going to be excavation or nearby?
Not to my knowledge, but the Tico substation is on that southwest corner across the street. And I would probably have to defer to Mosaic on how they would be making sure that any underground utilities aren't impacted prior to the mining activities. I know that there was I know they have pipes underground that are their pipes and stuff.
Like
but I would
water and
have to
sewer
defer.
pipes or?
I would have to defer to them
All right.
on that as well. Because I know that there were some pipes underground there.
I noticed in the file you sent notice to, or the applicant sent notice to TICO of this particular
Correct, that is
application.
correct.
Okay.
And we didn't receive any kind of comment or concern back from Tico with that public notice.
Okay.
Do you have any more questions?
No, thank you so much. I appreciate your help.
Not a problem.
So is there anyone here that wishes to speak as in favor of the application, other than the applicant? Let the record reflect there's no one that's showing any inclination that way. So is there anyone here that wishes to speak that's in opposition to the application? We'll let the record reflect there's no one here in opposition to the application. And then I believe that staff has an opportunity to come back if you choose to at this point to make any other comments that you believe necessary.
I do not.
Thank you. And then finally, the applicant has an opportunity to come back up and make any comments in rebuttal or in closing.
We have nothing further. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. And thanks to everyone that has participated in this public hearing. And so we'll go to close the public hearing. And again, I have 15 working days from today, so it'll be June 27th to file a recommendation and findings with the clerk to issue to the Board of County Commissioners. And if you need a copy of the record or need to inspect the record, you can contact the Board of County Commissioners clerk for information. And want to thank everybody for participating today. And we'll go ahead and close this public hearing. So thank you.